There she go. All right, guys, welcome to, and I would say another live of the Darden Live Talk, but it's not. This is something different. This is just Tyrone Darden coming to you as a concerned citizen. And for me, it's all about being an informed voter. So we know there's a municipal election coming up, and on Monday, we start early vote. And so with that being said, let's see what's on the ballot. We know we have the mayor on the ballot. There's 14 candidates that are running for mayor. All 10 city council districts are on the ballot. So we have that. We know District 2 is highly contested with 12. We won't get on that. And we know that we have two propositions. Proposition A that speaks to the bonds and how housing can be a part of the bond. And then we have Proposition B. But I'm not going to say anything about Proposition B. What I'm going to do is we got our Proposition B expert here with us. His name is James Dykman, and he's with FixSAPD. So first, I want to thank James for coming up. He has a lot going on, a lot of different appearances because he's trying to get the word out, but he made time for you tonight, this evening, to get the information out. So James, this is what I want you to do. Number one, I want you to give 30 seconds about who you are and what you're doing and what your aspirations in life are. The second thing I want you to do is talk about FixSAPD, again, the short version. What is that? And then the third thing is the process, it can be a minute on that, of what it took to get Plan B, Proposition B on the ballot. All right, James, go ahead.
Great, Tyrone. Thank you so much for having me here. This is fantastic. Yeah, I'm James Dykman. Let's see if it'll... Oh, there it is. Yeah, no, you're good. James Dykman. I'm the policy and data analyst for FixSAPD. I really got started in this when I was focused on police union contracts back last February, and it wasn't that big of a topic. And then, of course, with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and, just the horrible situations around both of their murders, it really just came down to, okay, what do I do next? How do I get involved? And, the founders of FixSAPD came into a group meeting that was happening downtown and expressed, their opinion on how we can change this system through a vote. And that was through Proposition B and being able to bring two different laws, Chapter 174 and 143, onto a ballot through a petition effort. So direct action through petition signatures and then a direct action through a vote. So that felt like the most influential way to see change, especially since San Antonio has the highest rehire rate of fired officers in the nation. So 70% of officers that are fired get their jobs back through a pretty much a broken accountability system. And so FixSAPD was really born out of the need to address this primary issue of officers coming back. And what we ended up finding out was there is a police union contract, so a contract negotiated between the city and the police. And in that contract are issues regarding how discipline happens, right? So how much time do they get access to evidence? How much time do they have before they're, investigated? All of these parameters are set out within the contract, and it gets very mind-numbing really fast. But what you end up finding out is when you get through all of this, there is a slow process in this contract that brings all of these officers back. And the biggest part of that is, this random lawyer that gets to be brought in to essentially overturn the will of the chief. And so when we were looking at how to solve this problem, we really found that we need to change the way that the city and the police union get to negotiate their contract. And we really need to find a way to give citizens a lot more of a voice at that table. Because what we found out from 2016 was, well, we're going to prioritize healthcare, and then you're going to have to wait 4 more years. right? And what ended up happening was, you had the situation of Matthew Luckhurst, who gave a feces sandwich to a homeless man and then got his job back, even though officers were the ones that turned him in. And then you have the case of Tim Garcia, who called a young black man he was violently arresting, the N-word over and over and over again. And he still got his job back, with the arbitrator saying, you know what, I think that officer was having a bad day. And I think that he's learned his lesson. I don't think this is indicative of racist behavior, is what that lawyer had said. And so we found that, there are consequences to having these issues in the contract. And by, bringing Proposition B to the ballot, this was the only way to make a change, to really affect this system as a first step. This is a first in many steps. And, Tyrone, as you said, how is this process of bringing this to the ballot? Well, the most important part to remember is we had to get signatures, petition signatures from registered San Antonio voters. And for one of those laws, the one we're seeing now, we had to get 20,000 signatures. And so we had to get that. And then you have to get a little bit more because they kind of cut down. And with 143, you had to get 80,000 signatures. So a much larger threshold. And during a pandemic, a lot more difficult. And so what you're seeing with Proposition B is just this first step. We're going after 174, and then we're going after 143 after this election, collecting the signatures, keeping that up. But all of that is set out in the law. We're allowed to bring these to a ballot vote. The Texas legislature said, let's leave it up to the citizens to decide whether or not, the police have this, specific ability to negotiate. And that was all left up to the voters. And so 50 years ago, they did it. That was when we had a lot of voter suppression. And now that we're bringing it back, we're going to be seeing a very different vote on this. And we're going to see a lot more voices in regards to it.
Thank you for all that, James. Let me say this, and I want to kind of be clear on how James and I got together. I'm a candidate. I'm running for city council, District 2, and a question that we already always ask: are we for or are we against Proposition B? And really, they preface it with, "Are you for accountability?" And depending on who you police accountability, and depending on who you're talking to, they might say, "Are you for defunding the police?" That wasn't good enough for me. As a candidate, I believe that it is the candidate's job to remove any doubt from any potential voter on why they should support you. And I believe the same thing for propositions. Proposition A and B are both on the ballot. To me, they're candidates. They should be running a campaign, and they should be doing their best to get the support of the people. And so, James, we bumped into each other, and we had a candid conversation. And I ran through all of my concerns, my questions, the things I had gaps on, because all I heard was sound bites. I heard police accountability, I heard feces sandwich, I heard defund the police, I heard 600 police are going to quit. What does that mean to me as an informed voter? And so we walked through this process. It took us about 2 hours, James, and we walked through this process. And I said, you know what? The people don't have 2 hours to listen, so we're gonna give them about 30 minutes. So there were 3 questions that I kind of got out of it, and so James and I are gonna walk through those 3 questions. If there's anyone that is tuned in that wants to ask a question, we have the expert right now on one side of the ballot. If you want to ask those questions, put them in the chat, and if you feel like you want to have a conversation with either myself or James, we'll send you a link and you can hop on as well. But we'll start with the first question. James, you ready?
Ready.
Okay, so for me, my understanding is the premise of Proposition B is FixSAPD does not believe the contract is fair. And based on the fairness with collective bargaining, it allows bad police, dirty police officers that should not be serving and protecting our people to be on the force, to remain on the force. So my first question is, who negotiates these terrible contracts? Who negotiates these contracts for the city of San Antonio? And what is the role of the council? And I ask that because ultimately the public elects these council people and the mayor to vote on their behalf. And if the council is a part of something that is not benefiting the community, that seems to be a problem. So I'm gonna ask you one more time without my extra fluff. Who negotiates the contracts for the city of San Antonio, and what is the role of city council?
City manager and the city attorney are on the side of the city negotiating, and then the police union is on the other side of the table, known as the San Antonio Police Officers Association, or SAPOA. So you have these two sides that are negotiating, and the city council's only role is at the end of the process, at least as it is right now, is at the end of the process when they vote on a contract that both sides have kind of come to an agreement on. So it's a ratification is what it's called. So city manager, city attorney, police union, city council gets it at the very end, right? So that's how that works out. The issue that we're seeing with, Proposition B, and I mean, the reason we brought Proposition B forward is because of the issue that city council was not setting priorities at the beginning of the negotiations, right? They weren't drawing a line in the sand. They didn't pass a resolution saying, hey, these are the things that maybe they don't, necessarily all have to be addressed or all of these things need to be happening before we get a vote, but at least showing San Antonians what should be addressed or what should be talked about. City council didn't do that. They could have done that, and they didn't do that. They left it up to the city manager, and the city manager has only addressed, 6 of the 10 problems that, FixSAPD has been able to find within that contract. So they're doing it in a piecemeal form. And as I said before, back in 2016, they had this huge fight over healthcare. And then after that, the city council just signed off on the contract. There were 2 city council members, Ray Saldana and Ron Nuremberg, who voted against the contract. But Ray Saldana was focused on the disciplinary aspects. But unfortunately, the city council didn't hold, and we had to wait another 4 years. So when we're talking about how does the city council hold the line, they hold the line with the final vote, but they have to be in a majority if they're going to hold the line, if the city is not addressing all of the issues, or if they think that maybe the city manager has given too much to the police association.
So just some clarifying questions. The question is, who negotiates the contract for the city of San Antonio? And it sounds like the city council assigns someone to do the negotiating for the city.
Correct.
And then once they get to the point to where the contract is near final or final, it goes to the council and the council votes on it.
Correct.
So I want to be clear. FixSAPD believes that the current contract that the San Antonio Police Officers Association negotiated is a bad contract.
Correct.
And the city of San Antonio, the council members and the mayor, some of them who are still present, voted for this bad contract.
Correct.
Okay. My next question, because I want to be clear on the vote. When council votes on a contract, and you kind of already allude to this, when council votes on a contract, what is the level of agreement needed? And bear with me. Is it a majority, which is 50% plus 1? We have 10 council members and we have a mayor. So the 10 council members obviously are the ones that are voted initially. So that would take 6, 5 plus 1. Super majority, which is typically 67% or more. So in the 10, that would be 7 or more. Or unanimity, which is a unanimous vote, 100%. What is the level of agreement needed to pass a contract through city council?
Majority.
So all it takes is 6 votes to pass a bad contract.
Correct.
Tell me about that. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's absurd. The fact that, it depends on how you want to set up that system. But for, a majority to be able to turn, especially when the police association can endorse and has given, contributions to city council members, has block walk for them, it becomes a little blurring the lines, especially during a contract year. During this year, we have, the Proposition B has sucked the oxygen from them because they're focusing on this. But in previous years, they have knowingly been going after council members in order to be able to select those council members they know that will vote on their contract or contract that would be favorable to them. And so we're seeing that a majority doesn't work. And the reason that we're bringing Proposition B is because if Proposition B passes, San Antonio voters will get to actually have the final vote on a contract if they want. So you can bring forward a petition and you just say, hey, I brought forward this petition. I don't like what's in the contract. I don't think city council should have ratified this. and they can bring it to a vote. And San Antonio voters get to actually be the final vote if they don't believe that city council has reached all of the issues. And that's after city council votes.
And so, James, that leads me to my third question. And so far, so good. I haven't seen any questions in the comments, and so I'm thinking you're doing a good job breaking this down, and I'm doing a good job following up. So let's give us 2 thumbs up right now. So you've already again alluded to the third question. If Proposition B passes and Chapter 174 is repealed, what are the steps toward meet and confer? And what is the role of the public in a meet and confer system?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of confusion around this, especially because the ballot language is so confusing, right? So there is still going to be a contract, right? Like that is something we all need to remember. Austin, Houston, and Fort Worth all have meet and confer, and Dallas all have meet and confer. And they all have contracts with a police association. So the language of the ballot makes it seem like, oh, police aren't going to be able to associate. There's not going to be penalties for strikes and lockouts, and they're allowed to do the strikes and lockouts. But all of those things are still under meet and confer. You're still going to be able to make a contract. You're still going to be able to fight for wages and benefits. We just see that meet and confer is a better situation because we can actually, both parties come to the table when they feel like they need something, more from the city or from the police union, right? And so that's the situation we're seeing. The benefit of that, right, is what we saw in Austin. So in Austin, they actually gave on disciplinary issues in their contract. They were able to take away a lot of the issues in 143. They have one of the strongest civilian oversight systems in the state, and they have the best pay and benefits packages from that. So they gave and they got. Right. And we are not seeing that here in San Antonio under collective bargaining. There's not really much giving and a lot of taking in piecemeal forms, and citizens don't really have the final vote. And so meet and confer, because there's all these terms that flow around, meet and confer is just a tool by which the police association and the city can make a contract together, just as it is here. Right, it has the same power. It overpowers all other laws, so they can make changes that are, bad inside of 143. It's just there's more leverage for citizens, and there's more incentive to come to the table if things need to be hashed out. Right now, there's just a forced negotiation, and that leads to a lot of turmoil, especially over these issues of discipline. So we're seeing a lot more leverage with that.
Okay, 2 points of clarity. The first point of clarity. How does the city of San Antonio get to a meet and confer system, number one? And then number two, once we're in a meet and confer system and the contracts are negotiated and the city and the union, they say, okay, this is what we want to bring forward to the people. What is that process?
Yeah, so the first question is making, when we move over to this new system, if, Prop B passes, it's up to the association, the police association, to decide which law they associate under. So there's 2 different types of meet and confer laws. We have 143, and then there's also 142. So they get to choose which one they associate under. 142 is what our park police have. And so the San Antonio Park Police, function under 142. Or you can do what Houston, Fort Worth, and Austin have done, which is go under 143. So they get the final choice on how they want their contract negotiated. And on the second question, what's really important is it's the same process for coming to a contract, right? So the city manager and the city attorney are still on one side, the police association is on the other. They come to the table. City council still gets that final vote. The most important part is that at the end of that, if citizens don't feel that all the issues are being addressed, like let's say what happened, in 2016, we couldn't do anything there. There was so much activism around it, and we literally just had to watch as the contract went through city council. We could bring it to a vote through a petition signature, which under these laws, it would only be about 10% of the people that voted in the last mayoral election, which, we know is usually only about 12%. So it's around 110, 120.
It was 101,000 people.
Yeah. So we would only need 10,000 signatures, less than what we have here, to be able to bring that contract up for a vote if we don't like it. So that's the process here. It's pretty much the same. It's not like a radical change. It's not crazy, right? Like it's always important. Like this isn't so radical. This is it's the same contract process, but at the end, citizens get that final vote. And this is just a new tool to make a contract.
And when citizens vote, it's yes or no?
Yes or no. Yeah.
And
Yes.
If it's yes, it moves forward for how long?
For however long they want to have that contract. So right now, the problem we have is you have a contract that's 4 years long, and then it has what's known as an evergreen clause. So they have 8 years to negotiate the contract. So that means that you could have 12 years of that contract, and they could be negotiating it for 8. And during that time, that contract stays, right? There's no leverage. And that is a huge amount of leverage. And that would go away when we move to a new contract. And that's a huge benefit because it's important. You should have time to be able to negotiate a contract. Like, you don't want to be pressuring. But 8 years is 4 different city council races. You could be picking and choosing your city council members throughout that time frame until you get the right ones, right? Because it's only a majority.
That makes sense.
You know.
And so what if it's no? What if it goes to the ballot and the people say, no, we don't want that contract? Then what?
They're forced back to the table. They got to negotiate again. And the citizens can do it again.
And is it a special election? Is it the next election? When?
That was actually that's a great question, because at first you're like, well, if it's a regular election, it could be months. But the city will, if it's not, whatever's the closest, if it's going to be a regular election like on November or in May, then it would be then. But then the city could also call a special election, which would be, as soon as possible. So they would call the special election, and then you would vote out the contract, boom, forced back to the table, which is what we would have loved 4 years ago, but unfortunately.
So James, and I want to appreciate you. I'm watching our ticker, and we got, a lot of people tuned in and out. So I know this information is getting taken in, and also will get passed around. I want to share this with you because, again, for me, I want to call myself an informed voter. And so I'm listening to you. I've listened to the debate. I'll listen now to the debate you said you just had with the Democratic Party. And I've said in an interview with Sapoa, and they've made some great points as well. Ultimately, what I'm hearing from you is this: we're calling it FixSAPD, and that is, we want to fix SAPD and the bad contract. But really, what I'm hearing, we've had very poor leadership, because just because someone offers us a deal, it doesn't mean we have to take it. And it seems like we've just been taking it. When I say we, I'm saying our mayors. I'm not saying the current mayor, because I don't believe the current mayor was the mayor at the time, but he was a city council person. And James said he voted against it, so we'll give him thumbs up on that. But our mayors and our council people have been the people pushing this on the community. And so you call it FixSAPD, I call it Fix SA leadership, because ultimately there wouldn't be a contract if the city council didn't vote on it. And so I think we're in the same room, and I think we have the same ideas, but ultimately we need better leadership from our mayor all the way down to all 10 council districts. Because if 6 people are voting for bad contracts every time, we have a very, very, very big problem. What's your thoughts on that, James?
I think it does. I mean, it's both ways, right? It's not just, the police association on one side. The final people that get to have a say is the council. And if the council isn't holding a line, if they don't know what the line is, if they're not listening to citizens' concerns about a contract, you're just going to get this. And you're going to have to wait 4 years. In this case, the new contract is going to be 5 years. And they were trying to rush this contract process through before the vote, which, if they had ratified the contract and city council had signed off on it, we would have had that contract for 5 years, even if we voted yes for Proposition B, right? That is what you're talking about, is if leadership is giving in to, oh, okay, city manager says this is okay, or the police association is, really pressuring me to say yes from both sides. It really does take strong leadership to know these are the issues in the contract. We need to deal with arbitration. We need to deal with how much evidence they get. We need civilian oversight, which has not been talked about at all. We need better hiring process. We need all of these issues addressed, and we can't wait 5, 10, 15 years. And there needs to be leadership that takes that stand and that holds the line. And so you're exactly right. It is also on the side of the city of being able to hold the line on important issues of discipline.
So, James, I'm going to reach out to Sapoa, and I'm going to ask them to come on. because I'm telling you right now, at first, I wasn't for Proposition B one way or the other. And then I was interviewed by Sapor, and I was against Proposition B because I had one side. And then I talked to people from FixSAPD and other groups associated with it, and they really didn't give me the same information that Sapor gave. And then I watched the debate on KSAT 12, and you did a really good job. And so I said, I need to talk to that guy because I got some questions. And we talked again for over 2 hours. And you put me in a place that I felt like I can support Proposition B. But I'm going to tell you this. I'm not supporting the name FixSAPD. And I'm not supporting hold the police accountable. You know I want to hold accountable? Our leaders. Because ultimately, if a kid does something wrong, it's up to the parent to step in and make it right. And ultimately, our leaders are here to ensure that things are around us are right. And they haven't done that. So as of right now, I'm on the record. I'm for Proposition B. But Sapor has an opportunity to bring their points as well. But I'm not trying to fix SAPD because ultimately SAPD is just a part of it. The council and the mayor are the people who are supposed to be ensuring that the people's needs are being met and we're being represented fully. So with that being said, I appreciate what FixSAPD has done in regards to going and getting those signatures and getting it on the ballot. But I want to fix leadership. And until we can fix leadership, I have no problem with holding leadership accountable with sending those contracts to the ballot, to the people. So just in final thoughts, James, you said with 2 hours, you said for 2 hours for me. You've been on here for 26 minutes, going on 30 minutes when we close. What is not a sound bites, but those final words that you want to give to those voters that are on the fence? What do you want to say to them to get them to understand this is not a bad thing? This is a good thing. This is a positive thing. And this is something that we should support.
Yeah, the first thing we always have to remind everybody is that this is not defund. And the reason we always have to say that is, we don't, this is not for defund. And, the police association is continually using that phrase because they know it, strikes fear into the community. They know the community doesn't like the word. And so they're tying it. So this is not defund. This is about accountability. And as we've talked so far, and as we've gone through this, I think the line that you get is this is about giving San Antonians a voice if they don't feel that their leadership is listening to them. And Tyrone, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think if leadership is, giving their duties over to the city manager and not listening to the people and just kind of following line with city manager or the police association, citizens get to have that final vote. If if we have that vote yes for Proposition B. It gives a voice to citizens at the end of this process. And it makes sure that all issues are addressed now, not 5 years or 10 years or 15 years from now, but that we can have a final say. Because for too long, San Antonians have been at the back end of these contracts. Leadership has signed off on these 14 different times. The Express News, with their endorsement today of Proposition B, just said, if this process worked, why are we still here? This proposition wouldn't be here if this was working. And so even they recognize, the editorial board there recognizes, Julian Castro recognizes, so many people recognize that this issue could have been solved over the last 50 years. But because citizens haven't had a voice, it hasn't been. And so now it's time for a change, for voting yes for Proposition B.
Thank you, James. Hopefully those who tuned in live, you got what you came for, more information, because an informed voter is a good voter, is a voter that we need. And so my goal here was to get information, not sound bites, but information to the people. And again, anybody from Sapor, reach out to me, 210-378-3618, Tyrone Darden at hotmail.com. And guess what? We can link up and we can do the same thing. Like I said, I was on the fence. I needed more information, and I took those steps of due diligence. And where I am right now, I'm supporting Proposition B for the reasons why I said I was. Because I feel like we need better leadership, and until we get that, it needs to go back into the hands of the people. And ultimately, that's what I'm about, the people. So again, James, we about to close out right at 30 minutes, and that's a beautiful thing. I know you got things to do, and I got things to do. So thank you, man. Thank you, man. Thank you, man. Be blessed.
Thank you. You as well, Tyrone. Thank you so much.